You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
Max, it's episode 86 of the 21.5 Show, the show for professional pilots. Welcome back.
Back at it.
Yeah. It's been a busy week for us. We've been out adventuring, flying, vacationing with the kiddos. But first things first, got a little clip from our boy Christian that I wanted to play for you from our friend. You ready for this?
Yeah.
What up, though, man? We big chillin', baby. Pull the power on that thing, man. We about to short approach this thing. Flapjacks. Right rudder, left aileron. Let's bank this thing, man. Ally. No brick and mortar. Watch that airspeed, baby. You know it's Kang. We slipping and dipping, baby.
That was it. That was the quote I wanted. Airspeed, it's Kang. God, I love that guy.
Slipping and dipping, baby.
Yeah, it's so good. Anyways, back to a regularly scheduled program, Max. This is the show for professional pilots. I'm a professional pilot in business aviation, joined by my colleague Max.
And brother-in-law.
And brother-in-law.
Also in business aviation and the airlines.
Where have the airlines taken you today, sir?
I'm in Sacramento. I find myself in Sacramento quite a bit this month. I think like 6 nights worth.
This reminded me of a funny story. We tried to get our friend to tell this story, but he was too embarrassed. Do you remember when our college buddy was flying for NetJets and he had to fly to Sacramento like every day for Arnold Schwarzenegger? Remember when he was doing that? And so he would fly from, I think it was Santa Monica to Sacramento.
Yeah, somewhere down in Southern California.
And he would tell us like, what was the most important thing? Do you remember that?
Yeah, how hot the coffee was. Is this the hottest coffee you have?
He was like, so I remember our buddy would like have to time it, like they'd be like seeing when the SUVs would pull up and they'd have to check the temperature and he'd like pull it right out of the FBO, was it? And then like fill the coffee pot like right as the thing was pulling up, and it was this whole thing.
This whole thing about how hot the coffee is all the time for the governor.
He would put so much work into like the coffee temperature, and then one time Arnold just took the cup of coffee from him and was like, "Is this the hottest coffee you have?" He was so deflated. I love it. Anyways.
Speaking of coffee, one of our listeners has a company called FBO Coffee. It's genius because this business aviation spend tons of money and all this stuff. And then you go bring your coffee pot in and you get just whatever crap that the FBO brews. So this listener thought of this idea of, hey, why don't I package like enough coffee to make enough for the coffee pot that goes in the airplane? And you bring this in and be like, hey, make this coffee for my coffee pot. So you have like decent coffee, which is genius because with all the catering and all of the stuff that we spend money on to make this experience, and then you just get this crap coffee. So he sent us some samples and I brought it and I've just been using it for my pour over setup. You know?
I just see episode 84 for the full briefing on that.
Yeah, full brief if you're interested. But yeah, I use that. I've been using that. I just drank it this morning. It's actually really good. And that's a great idea. And it works good too. You would think it wouldn't work good for this, like, because I use a little bit for, say, 3 days or whatever.
Right.
But it's a resealable package. It's great that it is. I would have thought it would just be like you tear it open and dump it in because it's intended to be one use, but I've been using it for like 3 days and it reseals. It's awesome. Why don't you read his thing? So
yeah, he said, hey, Dylan and Max, I'm a longtime listener and enjoy the content. Keep up the excellent work. The latest podcast mentioned coffee solutions for traveling on the road. I too have struggled with this detail as a corporate operator. The owners spend a lot of money traveling and are served whatever the FBO provides them on the road. Unfortunately, that is the bottom dollar solution for an FBO since they give it away for free. So I launched FBO Coffee to change the industry standard for business aviation. Fresh and quality coffee designed to be stocked on aircraft or flight bags for travel. As a thank you for the podcast content, I'd like to send you some coffee pouches. He did that. We're sampling it now. I'll have a link to the website of Robbie's company. Well done, Robbie.
Yeah, good idea.
So we were having a discussion today, Max, earlier while I was driving, and We were talking about diversions, and there was a lot of weather in Phoenix this weekend that I was dealing with, and you had dealt with, I think, a few days before. We were talking about the difference between in business aviation, your divert options versus the airlines. I thought it was kind of an interesting perspective. For coming into Arizona, it's a little weird because the northeast part of the state, there's not a lot of infrastructure. There's not a lot going on there. There's not a lot of airports, especially towered airports. And so we were coming in, and that was like the only clear part of the state. So we're like coming towards Phoenix, and it looked like there might be this cell that was going to sit over the entire valley and close all the airports essentially. As a crew, we're going, well, we got to figure out where we're going to go. And we ultimately found an uncontrolled airport that was going to work well for us. But I was mentioning it to you and kind of talking about the airline side of things. Can you tell me a little bit about what you went through?
Yeah, we were coming in one day and just a bunch of weather had kind of popped up that was sort of unexpected. And this big line of thunderstorms had developed from Phoenix basically to Tucson.
Right.
And we're coming in and we didn't have like tons of extra gas, but we had some. And we're coming in like, wow, if we can't get into Phoenix and then we can't get into Tucson, the next place would be like Las Vegas would be the closest, right? And we're looking around like, what if you're coming and we don't have the gas to do that or whatever? And where are you going to go? In an airliner, we were talking about this. Captain and I had like an off airport diversion. And we're like, yeah, you could go here. There's these airports around or whatever. But then it's a matter of, we don't even have charts for all these airports, which I can't figure out why we don't just have a full set of charts for everything.
That's weird. Like I got it when
I know,
it was
it's
paper.
the weirdest thing. I got to figure that out because in this day and age on the iPad and stuff, like why would we not just have charts for every airport with a 5,000-foot runway, like just in case, like, you know, it's an interesting discussion where in a corporate jet, you're general aviation. You can just go wherever you have the performance to get in and out of and maybe weight bearing capacity concerns and stuff like that. But yeah, it was just interesting. I'm like, God, what would happen if we just bombed into Prescott, Arizona? Just because it came down to like, screw everything. We're just low on gas and you have to go find somewhere to go. So
it is interesting because there's just a non-station divert. I've never done it in an airliner. I remember we almost had to get into that situation a couple times, but I'd be really curious to hear from our listeners. So I'm sure.
Yeah, if anybody's done that, I would be interested because I've been asking around too, and I haven't come upon anyone that's done it.
If you've had to do a diversion to a non-outstation airport, I'd be curious to hear how it happened. I mean, you'd have to think about like the fuel, obviously, stairs. Like there's so many things you'd have, air stairs.
Well, let's see. You know what's funny is I was actually in the back of an airplane one time. I was coming from Scandinavia, I think like Stockholm on United to Newark, and we ended up diverting to Stuart Newburgh. You ever been there?
Yeah, corporate hot zone.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it was a United station. I remember it was like a 12-hour flight and we divert. And I'm just like, oh my God. And then we just stayed on the airplane and hung out for a while and they got us gas and we blasted off and went to Newark. But
fortunately, it was on United where they used to have from the cockpit audio channel. So you could have just plugged in to hear what they were up to.
I remember that.
So fun. Well, yeah, let us know if you've had to do that. Be curious. Oh, we got a new review, Max. Do you want to mention that for us?
Sure. From Hayden, 121.5 stars.
Oh,
clever. Dylan and Max, I really enjoy listening to the show. I'm a private pilot currently working on my instrument rating. The show gives me great insight on what to expect going into aviation as a career. I really enjoy all the career advice and information as I'm going through my training. I also really enjoy the great laughs throughout each episode. There's nothing better than driving to the airport and listening to a new episode before I fly. Keep up the amazing work. Look forward to each new episode. Thanks, Hayden.
Appreciate that, Hayden. We'll happily send you some 215 stickers if you shoot us an email with your mailing address, info@215podcast.com. We'll make that deal with anybody that writes a review for us, Spotify, Apple, or...
We're not above paying.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the form of stickers for reviews.
I think in radio terms, it used to be called payola. I'm not sure. I got to look that one up. Well, I think payola was when the record companies would pay radio stations to play their music more often, you know?
All right.
I don't know. We're not above payola. We're ready. If you're a record company or you want to write a review, we're ready to go. Speaking of ways that this show collects money, we also have some hats still available. A couple of gray left and several camo. For a $55 donation, we'd be happy to send you one. You can visit our website for more information on that. Oh, before we get to the mailbag, I did have one funny story, a parent corner. So we went to San Diego this week and we did the USS Midway aircraft carrier tour, which was incredible. They had an awesome time. And then the morning that we were leaving, because we were driving back to Phoenix, but we went to the San Diego Air and Space Museum, which is great, by the way. I don't know if you've been to any of those aircraft museums recently, but they have those like full motion simulators. That's like the fully enclosed and it can fully articulate 360 degrees around. You can do loops and rolls and everything in it. And it's for two people. And so, of course, my kids are grinding me to go ride this thing. I've got the 6-year-old and the 9-year-old. And so the 6-year-old wants to go first. And the guy goes, okay, you have 2 options. You can fly like a World War II fighter and do a little dogfight, or you can fly a Blue Angels airplane. So the 6-year-old's like, I want Blue Angels. So he's like, gets in there. He's not a very big kid. So he's like, we're strapped in and the shoulder things around him. And I have to go because he's not tall enough to go on his own. So I have to sit there. But of course, he wants to do everything. Let me tell you, I've done aerobatics. I've done a lot in an airplane. There's nothing like riding in an F-18 simulator with a 6-year-old at the controls. It's 5 minutes long. The guy's like, all right, well, you have 5 minutes. Do whatever you want. And
please tell me you got sick.
Oh, my God. It was the closest I've ever been to getting sick because he's just like, here's the most frustrating part. And I know you would find this is like, of course, for them, as I've mentioned before, like everything is measured on like barrel rolls. Like that's their thing. So they do like the world's worst barrel roll where they just shove the stick over. So you like are rolling, but then also the nose is dropping as you're inverted. So it's just like this terrible maneuver. And we probably did 100 barrel rolls in a row. And like, it was just, I'm yelling, I'm like, push the stick down. You know? But like he would do a barrel roll, but then do something next that you wouldn't expect. And so, I mean, it was just like, it was so jarring. So.
And then you had to go again?
And then I had to go again with my older son. And he did like 1 barrel roll. He's like, this isn't that fun. And then we just like practiced landing it and stuff. So that was much better. But yeah, and it was back to back. So I'm like, I don't know if I could do 10 minutes of this.
I wish you would have sent your wife with one.
Oh my God. That would have
been the best.
I offered it. There was no way. But yeah, if you think you're a real pilot, go do one of those full motion sims with a kid that doesn't know what they're doing and then find out what you're really made of. So,
well, that's good. I'm glad you got them prepped. For Dylan's oldest son birthday, I told him we would take him for pancake breakfast somewhere in my plane. So I told him to practice up because he's going to have to fly us. So we'll see how he does.
Yeah, he's good. He's fine. His barrel rolls are at a minimum, but oh man, the 6-year-olds, that was brutal.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. So anyways, off to the mailbag. I'm a little dizzy here, so just remembering that simulator session. So why don't you go ahead and do the mailbag intro?
Mailbag, of course, as always, is brought to you by our sponsor, Advanced Aircrew Academy, who will be featured on this episode promoting the Winter Ops module as we discuss the intricacies of winter operations and refresh everyone's memory. aircrewacademy.com for all of your training needs.
All right. Email number 1. Gents, thanks for the awesome show about the Coast Guard. Very well done. Here is a good link that shows some of the rescues in the Fort Myers area after Hurricane Ian came through. Keep up the great work. You guys are my favorite podcast. By the way, this video shows that we also rescue pets. So Greg sent that. Did you watch that video?
Yeah, I did. That was crazy.
It was funny. So they show the guy jumping out of the helicopter, going down on the winch, and then there's like a younger guy, maybe in his 20s, and then maybe an older woman, maybe in her 60s. And the guy is so excited to see them because he's like, I'm going on a helicopter ride. And he's like smiling. He's got this big grin on his face. And then they're like, well, is everyone okay? Like, are there any neighbors? He's like, no, everyone's fine. Let's get on the helicopter.
He goes, yeah, I already went and checked them all out. Let's go. Let's go.
That was a good fun. It was a funny video. I'll post a link to that video because I thought it was good. But thanks for sending that, Greg. Next one. Go ahead.
Dylan and Max, my flying days are over, but I still really enjoy listening to your podcast. You have very interesting topics and great guests. I have a great suggestion for you. Dr. Van at the Mayo Clinic, he is an FAA medical examiner and a long COVID expert. He also has a podcast. He'd be an excellent follow-on to your most recent episode. I'm a perfect example that every pilot needs long-term disability insurance. I was 52 years old and a 767 captain at UPS when I was diagnosed with ALS at the Mayo Clinic in 2019. I lived super healthy, but that didn't matter. I've been to the Mayo 23 times and participated in phase 2 stem cell trial and can't say enough good things about that place. They are ranked #1 hospital in the world and they deserve it. I don't know if you're aware of the Clear Approach and ProPilot programs at Mayo. Approximately 60% of the medicals they do are special issuance, so they are very experienced in dealing with difficult cases and getting pilots back in the air. I'm getting weak now, but all I can do is roll with the punches and take one day at a time and smile as much as I can. As you can see in the attached photo, I'm well taken care of. I'm getting a neck rub and PT at the same time, so the struggle is real. My dog Stella is always by my side. Keep up the great work you guys do. Sincerely, Steve.
A really special message, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing it. And he did send a few photos. But, what struck me was Steve's attitude of trying to educate folks, but also seems like he has the best attitude possible tackling this challenge. So we certainly salute you, Steve, and appreciate you trying to spread the word to other pilots. Obviously, listeners of our show know that we're huge fans of insuring for the unknown with our friends at Harvey Watt. Yeah. You just never know, right?
Totally. Because as younger pilots, I think the last thing on your mind is always like these type of benefits and disability insurance and all of that. And then as you turn into an older pilot, all of a sudden those things become very important.
Yeah.
And this is a good reason why. So
thank you for the reminder, Steve. Glad you're enjoying the show and keep fighting out there. Ooh, next, more Formula One stuff. This is my favorite. Hey guys, wanted to send a quick note about the 2 questions from episode 84. The Formula One teams have contracts with freight companies who ship their stuff around the world. My airline does have one of these contracts, and they do move a lot of the equipment around. But what you get to see from the outside are just boxes with team stickers on them. I have seen pictures where the entire car is loaded on a pallet, but that's kind of rare. There's a couple of videos on YouTube that show how it's done. As for the drivers, they usually fly commercial. I flew Sebastian Vettel once from Australia to Singapore when I was with my previous airline. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture to prove it. ... As for converting from FAA ATP to European ATP, the process is painful. First, you need to choose the control, essentially the country where you want the license from. Then you go to send in your credentials, and based on your experience, they might give you an exemption from sitting for ground school. That's the only exemption one can hope to get. After that, you appear for 14 ! Examinations, at least 3 of which you need tutoring for. After that, there's a flight test. Not that it can't be done, but do understand you will need the better part of a year to be done with this. And that's from Nandu.
yeah, that's intense. I don't want to have to do that.
Yeah, no, stay in the States.
All right. Hello. I've been listening to y'all's podcast for a few months now and can't wait for each new episode to come out. I typically listen while commuting to work and love how you guys bring it all the different aspects and career paths of aviation, which brings me to my question. How can I, or how do you recommend that I go about choosing what part of aviation to go to? I don't know where I want to end in the long run, legacy carrier, cargo, or even corporate. How did you guys decide which path was the right one for you and your family? I'm currently a newish regional FO and just started as the new pay rate started. I can't believe how lucky I was with that. My company also has retention bonuses in place as well, so I do feel like I would be dumb to leave anytime soon. However, I want to do what's right/needed to get to my forever career, if you will. Thanks in advance for y'all's help, and sorry about the long email. Thanks, Cole. Well, I think the way we did it was by trying.
Yeah.
And that's why we always said the most efficient way to go to a big carrier is flight instruct, go to the regional, upgrade, go to the big carrier. But that's kind of a boring way to go about it, in my opinion. You know, I went to the regional. I was like, this is kind of a grind. And most of it's because I was commuting. And as if you listen to the show, know I'm vehemently opposed to commuting. So I quit and went to business aviation and tried that for a while and loved it. Clearly, I just can't quit that habit either, but the airlines are great too. And so I don't know. You just kind of figure it out along the way. But what I would say is just try and provide yourself with some sort of variety, right?
Yeah.
And try everything you can.
I think the point here, especially Cole, is depending on how much attachment you have in your life, i.e. family, spouse, etc. That's going to determine a lot about how much different experimentation you can take as far as different careers. So, you know, if you're young and single and don't have a lot tying you down, get a couple thousand hours at the regional and go try something else if you want.
Who would have ever thought you'd have the golden handcuffs at the regional, though?
Yeah, I know.
Like, what world are we living
just
in
can't leave
right now?
Oh,
The money's too good at the regional
Piedmont.
now. I can't
do
leave.
it.
I mean, what?
God. I don't know about these retention bonuses, like if you have to like sign contracts or how that works.
Well, yeah. I mean, the whole point is to keep you around
Keep
for
you there,
a length
yeah.
of time. So it's
If you're going to sign and take one of those retention bonuses, all that's doing is removing your flexibility. And if you listen to the show before, you know that we say flexibility is the key to air power. So every situation is different. Maybe you need that money for school loans, or you've got someone sick in your family. I don't know. So I can't say whether or not you should take those bonuses, but the more flexible you can be with your options, the better off you're going to be. I think that's the
he's
advice.
trying to do like to plan it out. I never did that. I just kind of rolled with it and was like, oh, maybe I'll do this. Oh, then
Yeah.
I got laid off and I was like, well, I guess I
Yeah.
need a job, so I'll do this and whatever. You just
Exactly.
kind of figure it out as you go, and your career sort of takes shape from there. And then,
Yeah.
at least when I knew it was time to, like I say, grow up and get a real job at the airlines, kind of knew what I was in for and knew where I'd come from, and here I am sitting in Sacramento talking to you.
Exactly. It's just too many unknowns. One step at a time, Cole. Good luck. I think your timing is impeccable, as you realize. Let us know if you're getting the boat or the airplane. Okay, that's the mailbag. Thanks so much to everyone who wrote in. info@215podcast.com if you've got something to share.
Or anonymously at
yeah.
215 Podcast. Those ones are always the juiciest,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you can also do the flight advice. And I'm going to remind you, Max, that we're moving flight advice to after the main interview. So
thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, stick around for that. We'll be back with flight advice. Speaking of the main interview, I think folks are really going to enjoy our discussion with Ryan from Advanced Aircrew Academy. We just got back into winter ops mode,
It's time. I just put
coming.
my coat back in my bag.
I know.
My winter coat.
We're here.
It is upon us.
And I think especially for folks, the whole discussion started for us, Max, when you did your winter ops training at your airline. And it's a little bit more structured and they say, hey, here's what's new. But as a Part 91 operator especially, there is no, hey, complete this module, or here's what's the latest on Type 4, holdover times, et cetera. So it's on you as a 91 operator to kind of refresh yourself. So I think this is a great conversation to kind of get the wheels turning again, especially for us.
Remind you to download the newest holdover tables.
Version 1.1, it's riveting.
Familiarize yourself with the cold weather operations supplement of your AFM.
Absolutely.
All that fun stuff.
And call your favorite FBO and find out what their price per gallon is on Type 4 these days.
What type they have. If the truck has been tested, is heating properly, all kinds of
Exactly. Who's certified? Lots to do.
Cold weather operations, the most boring thing in the back of your mind until all of a sudden it's the most important thing in your day.
Exactly. It's like Red Guard. We'll have to tell that story another time. Okay, here we go. Our conversation with Ryan. Max, we're so pleased to have Ryan from Advanced Aircrew Academy join us today. Ryan is a subject matter expert for many things for Advanced Aircrew Academy. And for today's topic, he's going to be educating us a little on winter of ops, because as Ned Stark says,
and winter is coming.
Welcome to the program, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Ryan, tell us a little bit about your background and how you became a subject matter expert with Advanced Aircrew Academy.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast here. So, third generation pilot. My grandfather was a pilot. My dad was a pilot. And my career choice was pretty straightforward for me. So, through my career path, I've always flown corporate aviation, fractionals, and have really enjoyed the business side of the aviation industry. And I was very fortunate about 15 years ago to be tapped on the shoulder to join the group over at Advanced Aircrew Academy. And it's been a wonderful program, good group of people working on the team and creating that learning program for a wide range of customers.
So how did you become the subject matter expert for winter operations?
So at a previous job, we were working together and had a responsibility for teaching ground school for a large 135 operation. And it was just one of the subjects that I kind of gravitated to. Living up in the Northeast here, I've been exposed to winter operations and de-icing and making sure you're not just polishing that frost smooth on the wing for many years. So it's been a natural progression on my side.
Right. The way we came up with the idea for the show, Ryan, is that I was doing my airline computer-based training, which was winter ops, because obviously it's right around the corner, and that's just kind of how it works into the program. I was like, this is great. 121 with all the resources that we have, and we have apps for holdover times, and they make it pretty simple, but it's a pretty complex thing. And I was thinking, especially from the Part 91 flight department, where say you're from Arizona and you don't deal with this stuff a lot at your home base, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in Aspen on New Year's and it's snowing and you're trying to depart, and all of a sudden winter operations is in your face and you haven't really reviewed it. So that's kind of the impetus for this segment of the show, is to maybe put it on the radar of some people that aren't spoon-fed to, I guess we'll say.
Absolutely. Throughout the year, we're always trying to reduce risk and identify those errors and threats in our flight operations. And, they're always prevalent throughout the whole year, but you get towards the wintertime, you get many other layers added onto it that you have to consider. And if you haven't been practicing it or been exposed to it all summer and fall, then all of a sudden, like you said, you need to order up some Type 1 and Type 4. And how do you figure that out? And how do you make sure that it's still working correctly so you can depart safely? So it's definitely a good time to review that. And a lot of the information you can review and look at ahead of time. A trip's coming up. There may be a possibility of it being active ground icing conditions. So you can look at it ahead of time. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that.
Sure. And there's some other questions too. I mean, we all know that the holdover guidelines are issued every year and it's that. But one of the questions I've always had is like, why does that have to be reissued every single year? Like, what's changing?
So from a couple key accidents in the airline world, the Transport Canada and FAA came together, said, hey, we have a lot of resources. Let's work together with some of the large engineering firms, SAE, and use our test labs to figure out how do these fluids work? How can we best measure them and apply it for the industry? And even though it's science, it's still always evolving as far as the measuring and the testing protocol. So the industry within the SAE, that they call it the G12, where they have a bunch of testing protocols. So one is like the shearing action for anti-ice fluids and how it shears off the wing. The other one is lowest operational use temperature values. And sometimes they'll test a fluid and say, you know what, based on our criteria, it's failed. So we don't include it on the list anymore. Or a commercial company will come out with a new product and they'll test it and say, all right, how does it compare to the other ones? What's its holdover time values? And then they put it in the holdover guideline.
Okay. So let's take this from your perspective of, winter day and there's snow and you're trying to depart and the airplane's been sitting outside for a couple hours. But how does that differ for the 91 to the 135 to the 121 pilot? Like the process of removing the snow or frost or ice and getting and legally taking off as far as like from the FAA's view?
So at the end of the day, everyone, whether you're 121, 135, 91, has to comply with the clean aircraft concept. So no contamination at all on any part of the airplane. Plane needs to be clean. They'll go through and say, the critical surfaces, pitot tubes, propellers, every critical part on the airplane needs to be free of contaminants. So from the view of the FAA, they're looking at either a approved ground de-icing program or a non-approved. So if you take a look at the Cadillac version, the 121, so under 121-629 Charlie, you have it approved. So at your airline, you operate under OpSpecs A23. And you have a full group of professionals helping you along through that process. You have your ground de-icers, you have all your ground support crew. They've all been through a company-approved training program, and they know their specific role within that whole process of getting the plane cleaned and safe to depart. You take that total opposite side of that, 135, 91, the PIC is responsible for doing all those various jobs of those employees at the airline. So that everything rests on the pilot's shoulder, making sure that wing, those critical surfaces are totally clean. So how do you go about it? First step that I would approach it with is, what resources and information do you have? The most current FAA holdover time guidelines with its accompanying, and the FAA publishes a document. It's called the Revised FAA Approved De-icing Program Updates. And it's basically meant to go together with the holdover time guidelines. It gives a lot of background information for the charts. You have your OEM cold weather operations manual. So how your manufacturer says to do the pre-flight and how you would configure the airplane for de-icing and everything associated with that. You have your SMS program and including risk management into that. You have your company SOPs. Under the category of risk management, a company may elect to do a process one way versus another. So you have a lot of the resources available to you.
So it all comes down to the clean aircraft concept and not having any contaminants on the airplane. But getting to that point, I guess, is my question. Because I know if 121 is, like you said, it's all approved programs. There's lots of resources. I mean, we have a holdover app. It downloads the METAR, put in the precipitation, the type of fluid, it calculates it, tells you, has a timer. There's all this stuff just because we do it so much. But like I said, from the 91 person, I mean, at a minimum, you have to at least have the latest updated holdover time guidelines document, right? To start with. So that you can use kind of the old school and go through it and figure out what the appropriate holdover time was, given the intensity and type of precipitation and the fluid applied.
The available information is all the same. Everyone's using the same holdover time guidelines. I'd say 135 has a slight advantage because they will be doing a recurrent training every year to refresh their flight crew, which is a good mental exercise. 91's not required to do that. So they're left up to their own devices to either assign that for their flight crews or not. But on the corporate side, whether it's 135 or 91, the PIC, it's having that big picture of the available resources is important. So, you're departing out of a certain airport, you can call the FBO ahead of time. You can chat with the personnel there and say, hey, what type of active fluids are you using? What's the specific brand name? Have you been de-icing yet this year? How's your truck maintenance? Is your truck even working? Do you have a truck? Do you have a heated hangar available? So there's a lot of questions you can do for homework ahead of time to prep for your trip into that airport and get a better picture of what resources do you actually have to use. So I used to work at a 91 operation prior to my current job, and the boss would like to go up to upstate New York. And there was a non-towered airport, very convenient to his destination he wanted to go to. And during the summertime, we'd go up there often. But with the lake effect snow coming off the Great Lakes upstate New York, there came a point where we had to bring him into an airport much further away, an additional hour drive for him, because they had a hangar there and they had de-ice. And I had to educate the owner, if we're at your preferred airport and it starts actively snowing and we can't get the plane clean, we don't have any tools or resources to clean the plane theoretically could be stuck there all winter. We're not going to take off at all with any contaminants on the plane.
Right.
And as soon as I'd explained to him that your plane could be stuck in upstate New York for the whole winter because it's iced over and we don't have the resources to clean it, made the plan B much more appealing. So doing the homework ahead of time can be very key.
That's a good point. Ryan, I want to circle back on something when we talk about the holdover times as a Part 91 pilot. The charts could be intimidating, especially if you don't have a fancy app like Max does. But even if you go through the calculations and you figure out what brand it is and, okay, I guess this is the weather, and you use the chart correctly, I think it's important to remember the chart is just a chart. At the end of the day, it's on us as this PIC, especially in Part 91, to make sure there's no contamination on the wing, right? I mean, so that comes into this weird pre-takeoff contamination check thing, which I think at certain airports might be confusing. Wait, can we get down to the end of the runway and open the door and get out? And how does that even work? Have you come across this pre-contamination check, especially right before takeoff? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The pre-takeoff contamination check is one of the key tools for ensuring that right before you take off, yes, the airplane is clean, and I can definitively say that I'm complying with the clean aircraft concept. So with the holdover times and using anti-ice fluids to extend your window to depart safely, they work great. There's a lot of science and engineering that goes into calculating those times. I always think of it as the old Ronald Reagan slogan, trust but verify. All right. So as a 91 pilot, you can use those applications on your iPad and make it more straightforward to calculate a holdover time. But 5 minutes before takeoff, get up, walk back in the cabin. And if you have a clear shot through the cabin windows, take a look at the fluid. Does it look nice and glossy? Is it still green? Does it visually look like the wing is still clear and not contaminated? If you have a poor view of the wing and you can't get a good view of that critical surface, then you need to start doing a little bit more homework with ground control, asking them, hey, can we get out of line here? Where's a good spot for us for a short moment to get outside and actually touch the wing, do a tactile inspection? And that's really the gold standard. Using your eyes, looking through the cabin window, it's great. And a lot of times, yes, you can get a good view of it and make it a decision. Yes, the plane is clean. But every once in a while, you have that little question in the back of your head. It's like, I can't positively tell. And so the gold standard is getting outside and doing a tactile, take your gloves off, fingers on the leading edge of the wing, and touch the wing. Does it feel slushy? Do you feel ice particles suspended in the fluid? Is it still, maybe the de-icer missed some frozen contaminants with the type 1 when he was cleaning the wing off, and now it's just being covered up by type 4, So the gold standard is always the tactile inspection. But going back to your that key phrase, pre-takeoff contamination check, it should be, burned in our brains, that trust but verify. Yes, we have fluid on the wing. Yes, we are within our holdover time value, but we want to double check that and make sure the fluid is actually still actively working.
Yeah, it's really well said. I'm just going through this in my head. I'm a Part 91 operator. We're based in the Southwest. We never see snow.
And just kind of having this conversation gets the wheels turning a little bit about, man, this is what we should do. Have you heard of operators going through some kind of, I don't know, I want to use the term chair flying, but going through these procedures beforehand? It sounds like that's fairly important, and there's so many different layers about this. Do you have any tips for folks to kind of knock the cobwebs out when we're getting close to this season and kind of familiarizing themselves with some of this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So with your own unique operation, we all have a typical city pairs or airport locations we go to often. You can make a phone call to the FBO and say, whichever Signature, Atlantic, whichever FBO, and call them up, say, hey, we may be having a couple trips coming in this winter. Which de-ice and anti-ice fluid brand name have you guys purchased for this upcoming winter? Then you can start getting very specific in the charts and saying, oh, yeah, it's this brand name. And when we go up there, this is the chart, page 42 is what we're going to be using when we're actively there. A good review of the OEM's cold weather operation manual. Haven't used it all season, spring, summer, fall, but then all of a sudden, where is it in the application for your specific airplane? Where is it located? Has there been any revisions to it from the previous year? And, it's almost kind of the lines of checklist management. You're going to be hopping through a couple sub checklists in order to find that while you're running your normal checklist. So reviewing that, I'd also include the discussion with the company SOPs and some of the more well thought through SOPs that I've seen at some companies include the OEM's checklists within the company's SOPs. So it's much less searching for that when you're actually in the cockpit trying to get going.
Yeah, doing de-icing and anti-icing is such a non-standard operation that, the airline's supposed to be a card and it's a read-do checklist because it's just something you don't do that much, but it's critically important when it's time to do it. And so I think that's smart. Instead of digging through the book there with everybody on board while the de-ice truck is approaching, it might be wise to have pulled that stuff out and made a copy of it and have it handy in the cockpit or on your iPad or whatever, just to keep things moving slowly, because it's unpleasant. It's expensive, especially when you're a corporate operator in a ski town, perhaps. And de-icing is never fun, but it is obviously critically important to safely operate an airplane. And so I think the preparation is always in order to make sure things go smoothly and all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Max, let's take a quick break from our discussion with Ryan to remind the listeners, winter is coming, or perhaps already here, when it comes to the financial markets. Positioning your portfolio in a polar bear market is crucial. Do you really know what you're doing? Be honest, it's probably time to set up your free call with our friend and certified financial planner, Tim Pope. He's been helping professional pilots nationwide create and execute a smart financial strategy. Timothy P. Pope, your financial planning partner for all phases of your financial flight. Check the show notes for a link to book your free appointment with Tim. All right, back to the show.
I have a question for both of you, especially from the Part 91 aspect. How do you set the expectation with your passengers? Do you guys typically do a brief? Max, I know you flew into ski country all the time with a previous job, and Ryan, you're operating out of the Northeast. I imagine maybe the first couple times you do it, you have a conversation with your passengers. Ryan, how does that work?
Yes, I mean, having the big picture of the weather, what's going on, is important. As the weather gets worse, you're looking on the charts and you go from the light to moderate to heavy precip. You can look at this ahead of time, but once you start getting into that heavy precip, or the super cooled water droplets, the freezing rain and the ice pellets, that really gets my attention. And there comes a point where even if you had all your ducks lined up in a row, the ground de-icer is ready to go, and you're at the end of the runway, sometimes in heavy snow, you can't even safely depart. So given the principal a heads up on there's a really bad blizzard coming up, is there any room to shift your departure or the arrival by a few hours or go the night before? Can really make a difference. There does come a point where you just, you have to stop the show. You have to learn when to say no and say it's actually too bad to take off. A whole other thing with the 91 or 135 flying is, are you going to a non-towered airport or are you going to a big Class B airport? You're going up to, say, I always think of Toronto Pearson. They have a world-class de-icing operation up there with very well resourced, and it's a smooth running watch up there. It's just, they do a very good job. And they publish their procedures, and you can go up there and get in line and get de-iced, and they do a great job. You compare that to a non-towered airport where you're not really sure what they have. I remember pulling into a non-towered airport one time in the evening. We unloaded the passengers, did a quick tactile check of the wings, realized that the snow that was falling was freezing, and we needed to get the ice truck out. And come to find out, the one ramp guy who was on duty that night had never even trained to run the truck. So we had to wait for the supervisor to come into the airport to then help the new fueler to show him how to run the truck. And 20-minute quick turn ended up being 2 hours on the ground. So the level of services and equipment you have at the various airports that we frequent can vary drastically.
That's a good point. Max, do you have any tips from your years of ski country adventures?
One of the things that I think was always the utmost concern was the cost of the de-ice for the owner of the airplane. I was just always upfront. I'm like, listen, this is going to cost around this much money. So just wrap your head around it now, because there's literally nothing we can do about it unless you want to wait till summer comes around. That's just the cost of doing business in this kind of environment. But also part of the pre-planning end of it too is you have to evaluate the cost of the potential de-ice based on what the weather forecast says and things, and the cost of hangar. And especially too, what really affected the cost of de-icing is spring skiing. So if the airplane you'd be there for a week and it snows, and then during the day it heats up above freezing and it would melt, start getting watery. And then it would go night and then it would freeze. So now you have this thick layer of clear ice that would build. So to get that off with heated type 2, it took a lot of fluid, a lot of blasting, and those got to be some very expensive. Some of the other things we would do if we were in that scenario, there's no hangar, we saw that coming, is if it would snow the night before, we'd go out there the afternoon and use the snow broom and try and sweep that stuff off the wings as a preventative measure. And that would certainly reduce the amount of fluid at the end of the day when it's time to depart, to try and blast all that contamination off.
You do have to get a little resourceful on helping reduce those costs. I mean, at the end of the day, in order to depart safely, yes, it's going to be an expensive bill, but using that snow broom, getting the larger quantity of contaminants off the airplane does help a little bit. Or an operator may consider relocating the jet to a different location that has better services or has a hangar. If the boss is going to be up skiing for the week, take that 30-minute repo leg to another airport that has a hangar. We can stay nice and warm and clean, and then coordinate the schedule for a pickup at the end of the trip there. So,
yeah, it's a good point. Getting back to one other comment you had, Ryan, about the difference between a controlled and uncontrolled. I think one of the airports we've seen a big problem is Hayden, Colorado. I don't know if any of you guys have been in there to Steamboat, but it's uncontrolled and you have a lot of aircraft coming in and out. And so obviously their capacity is reduced. And so you'll de-ice and everything will be just fine. And you'll taxi up to the other runway. And oh, by the way, you're going to be sitting for over an hour and your holdover time may be exceeded. So there's a lot of operational challenges when it comes to some planning. And at the end of the day, like so many other things, especially in business aviation, there's a lot of factors that are out of our control. And I don't know if you've heard through any of your experiences, people having to get out of line and take off and say, you know what, we got to go back. And we're going to have to re-spray down. That's a tough decision to make. That's professionalism to be able to do something like that. Have you heard any stories about that, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's been a while since I've been in a Hayden, but it does sound familiar with trying to depart out of there and get that hold for release out of a non-towered airport.
Yeah.
As you're trying to depart, is it active ground icing conditions? Is it currently snowing? So, well, then the holdover time is started and that fluid is degrading as precipitation accumulates. Or did you just need to get type 1, get the airplane clean, and then you can taxi out? And if it's not actively snowing, it's not active ground icing conditions, then you have much more leeway.
Right.
That's why they pay us the professional salary to make that tough decision. Yes, you may need to get out of the line and go back. So with the publication in August from the FAA, we have the titles, the FAA Holdover Time Guidelines. And then accompanied with that is their de-icing program updates. And the focus originally is for the 121 operators with OpSpecs A23, but the material is still the same. It applies to the 91 and 135 operators. There's comments in this second document that talks about, all right, if you do need a taxi back and get squirted down again with fresh type 4, well, you need to clean all that old stuff off first. So you actually have to go back and reapply type 1, make sure it's clean, do a tactile inspection. And you as the PIC, you're directing that. So you're going to be talking to the Iceman and saying, all right, after you spray it, I want you to take your glove off, go to the wing and just double check, make sure there's no ice on the wing. And then you get a second application, that type 4, and then your holdover time starts again. And then you can get back in line, wait for your release time. So you definitely are balancing many balls there in order to get off the ground safely.
Switching gears a little bit, we're talking about so much contamination on the airplane, but I wanted to talk a little bit about contamination on runways. And that's obviously one of the biggest factors for winter ops. You and I have both probably been in aviation long enough to remember the mu values and trying to remember, wait, is a big number good or is a big number bad? And that's all kind of gone away. And we've shifted to this thing called RCAM. And can you just give us a little update? What is RCAM exactly and how can we understand it?
Yeah, so the RCAM came from the Southwest accident out of Chicago Midway on December 8th, 2005. And a lot of different factors went into that accident. And the FAA took a big step back to survey the whole landscape of the industry and from many different angles. And they put together a takeoff and landing performance assessment aviation rulemaking committee, the TALPA ARC. And a lot of people from various parts of the industry, operators and the FAA got together and they said, all right, we need to rework this and figure out how can we disseminate current active information from ground ops and from ATC to the pilot so the pilots can make a better informed decision as they approach the runway. So a flight crew will do their landing field length calculations, and that's based on the weather forecast as you're going towards your destination. But then the TALPA ARC committee said, all right, we want to reemphasize, you get to the top of descent, you have the updated weather reports for your destination. What do you actually need? Has the weather gotten worse? Has the runway become more slippery? Is it contaminated? What do you actually need to land there? And then make a second decision. All right, is it safe to continue or are we going to need to divert? So there's a big emphasis on that. From this TALPA ARC committee, they came through with several different publications. You had SAFO 19001, and then also a Advisory Circular 9179A, which publishes the RCAM charts. It's much more straightforward. Instead of trying to figure out, like you'd reference, the mu readings and how does that fall into the performance charts, and you can quickly get lost in the weeds during a critical time of the flight where you need to make a decision. The RCAM chart is much more straightforward. So the runway condition codes give you numbers between 6 to 0, 6 being dry and 0 just being braking action nil. If the runway is dry and a 6, they're not going to report it. And if it's braking action is nil or is 0, they're not going to report that. That's just going to force the runway to be closed. On the RCAM numbers, the runway condition codes, you're going to be here reporting between RCAM 5 to RCAM 1, and it's for every 1/3 of the runway. So if it's actively raining, the runway is wet, it's going to be a 555. However, if it's a heavy thunderstorm and you start get pooling on the runway and there's standing water greater than an 1/8 inch of depth, it can quickly jump from a 5 to a 2. And so the braking action is medium to poor. And start worrying about hydroplaning and other reduced braking performance. So the RCAM is really, I believe, much cleaner, straightforward method to making that decision to continue or not and reducing that runway overrun and runway excursion risk.
Max, how do you guys do it at the airlines? Do you have anything you punch a code in with the numbers?
Yeah, you put in the RCC when you're calculating your performance takeoff or landing from what's being reported. And you can even pull up that report in ACARS and all that stuff. So it's pretty cut and dry.
So obviously one of the big threats that we have in winter ops, Ryan, is runway excursions, right? With the contaminated runway. We've just talked about your diminished braking action. We've talked about this before with Dan. There's a lot of factors that you can use to mitigate runway excursions, and a lot of them, the threat is amplified. Do you have any thoughts during winter ops, especially on mitigating those runway excursions?
Yeah, so the first thing I always think of is just the human factors of it. So what is your habit pattern during the summer? Are you aiming for that ATP criteria of landing in the landing zone, or are you holding it off for that smooth landing and floating an extra 1,000 feet down the runway for a smooth touchdown? And so those habit patterns carry through the wintertime when a couple extra 100 feet actually matter and make a big difference. Just my personal flying style, I'll try and make that precision landing in that specific zone that I'm aiming for every landing so that my habit pattern carries forward to the wintertime where I calculated I need a certain length within the available landing distance available. And I know that my hand-eye coordination and my muscle memory will be able to repeat that. So it's interesting looking in a lot of operators when they have the eFOCA data and looking at their historical performance in the fleet. That recorded data definitely tells a big story. And if you see a trend during the summertime and into the fall of landing outside the landing zone or looking for that smooth landing, you're setting yourself up for a possible overrun or excursion just based on the previous habits in the summer.
Yeah, those are really good points because that's the thing. You calculate it, do all the math and figure out your landing performance. But if you don't touch down at the point of intended touchdown, then it's all out the window real quick.
Absolutely.
All right, Ryan, our favorite part of the show, story time. You got anything good for our listeners?
Not necessarily a story, but always a neat destination. So every February in New Hampshire, Alton Bay is one of the charted runways. It's on Lake Winnipesaukee that when the ice gets, I believe, 12 inches thicker in the wintertime, very cold February, they plow the runway about 4,000 feet and a whole bunch of GA planes go up there and land on the ice. So it's a full-blown RCAM 0, braking action nil, and you'll go up and get some hot chocolate or some coffee up there on the ice runway. And it's a really fun winter destination. Say, oh yeah, ice, no problem. I go up there and land all the time.
Have you done it?
Oh yeah, I go up there every February. A lot of fun. I'll usually go up in like a Super Cub or some real light wing loading airplane and you're landing real slow and you just roll it out to the end and turn off and go get some hot chocolate. But that's always a neat destination in the wintertime. But my story I always like to tell is one of my first flying jobs was towing banners. And one of the planes we had a smoke system. So we'd go up and do some skywriting with it. And so the guy I was working for, he was dating a lady who was a teacher at an elementary school. So she said, oh, the kids would love to see, the class's name was called Wolfpack. We'd love to have you go up over the elementary school and write Wolfpack up in the air. And I'd be like, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do that. So my friend and I fly to the nearby airport and I get in a taxi and I drive over to the elementary school. So I'm talking to the kids. I have a transceiver. And my friend takes off overhead the school and he's climbing up. And so he's writing the letters horizontally. So you're looking up at him flat. So he's not writing them on the vertical. I get there a little early. I have the whole elementary school. I have their captive audience. And they're asking all the questions. And I kind of explain very basically what we're going to do. And we're going to write Wolfpack. And so we go outside and we're in the field, the little playground area. And I make radio contact with my buddy. And I'm like, all right, write the letters west to east and put the base of the letters or the bottom of the letters pointing north so that when we look up at it, we can clearly see Wolf Pack. And he's like, okay, all right. So he gets up and you can see him starting to draw the letters. And just conceptually, orientation wise, he had mixed everything up and he was writing the letters backwards. And it was like from right to left. And the comments from the kids was absolutely hilarious. They're like, does your friend know how to spell? That's not how you spell it. And all the teachers are shaking their heads. And it was just like, so you guys are pilots, huh? All right. Got it.
Got it.
That's pretty funny.
Oh my God.
So
Had you done that, Ryan? Did you do any of the skywriting?
I did not, but I helped with my friend. It was a lot of fun.
It seems pretty tough to execute correctly. Like,
yes,
there's a lot of factors that go into it. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody that's been involved in that.
You're waiting for the ideal, high pressure area with relatively calm wind so it doesn't get blown or torn apart quickly. And
I feel like it's a lot of like marriage proposals, right?
possibly.
Like it's going to be like a 6-letter maximum before it blows away. It was interesting. Now I wonder if they do it like, on ForeFlight, you can kind of like make your own little fixes, boom, 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 if you could kind of like, if they have something like that.
Oh yeah, on an iPad or something.
That's funny. That is funny. I know guys do it with the ADSB track. They'll do words there, but to actually still do it with smoke, it's a whole new level.
Yes.
Well, Ryan, we certainly appreciate your time today, sharing some of your expertise. Our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy have many resources for folks that want to learn more about winter ops. You created the winter ops module for folks to use. Can you tell us just in a couple minutes about that module and what they can expect to find in it?
Yeah, so we address 3 main areas. So surface contamination, cold temperature error calculations, and then landing performance and RCAM value discussion. So it's very comprehensive course and definitely is a good review prior to the winter season coming up here.
And that's something that you can have your flight department pilot will take that, and maybe, is that an hour and a half to go through that?
It's typically about an hour and a half and very straightforward. It's, I believe, a very well done product and definitely get you up to speed for the winter season approaching us.
Well, Ryan, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on the show. Thank you for bringing some awareness to cold weather ops that are right around the corner, at least in our hemisphere. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks to Ryan for joining us for that conversation. We'll have a link in the show notes to the Winter Ops module that Advanced Aircrew Academy has. Check it out. An hour and a half, probably well spent in maybe do a little chair flying. That's what I'm thinking about doing. Just go through the procedures.
And thanks to the FAA for getting rid of mu ratings.
Oh,
Just a little
that was
shout
the
out on
worst.
That was the worst. But remember, they had charts, but they wasn't supposed to correlate to anything specifically.
Yeah.
It's the dumbest thing of all time.
And like maybe you'd get it, and then like there'd be these trucks driving around, right? Because they had some sort of accelerometer in the back of a truck.
No, they had like a little trailer on it. And it would like break. Yeah, what a racket. Sometimes the FAA comes through and really changes things for the better.
Shout out. Big RCAM guys here.
Huge RCAM supporters.
Huge
Big
RCAM
guy.
supporters. Very against commuting. Very pro RCAM.
That is our position.
That's right.
Period.
It's time for the Harvey Watt Diamond Dogs. No Diamond Dog today, so I'm not sure why I played that song, but we're doing flight advice for our friends at Harvey Watt. You know, that email that Steven sent, he said, hey man, it's important to protect yourself. Things could happen to anybody. This is how you do it. You visit harveywatt.com. You check out all of the coverages that they provide to professional pilots, over 75,000 of them all over the globe. Loss of medical insurance, even if you're at a major airline and you think, hey man, I already got it covered. Every union negotiates different coverages. There might be a hole in what your carrier provides. Talk to Harvey Watt. Get the full picture. Protect yourself, protect your family, protect that silly little piece of white paper that we fold up. Flight advice, Max. You want me to read it to you, or are you going to read it to me?
You read it to me.
Okay. All right.
Quick.
Close your eyes, center yourself. This is very important. Hi, I am a CFI/II currently teaching about 3/4 time because I have 2 kids in elementary school and I like being around to get them to school and pick them up. It's my 4th career, but it was something I've always wanted to do. My end goal is to fly professionally somewhere that pays well and doesn't require too many overnights. Yeah, that's everybody's goal, I think. I've always leaned toward Part 121 because I think having a union contract is the best way to get paid equally and treated fairly. Parentheses, I'm a woman and almost 50. I currently live near the ECA/BWI area. I have enjoyed teaching a lot and am a better pilot for it. I now have about 800 hours and would like to get some turbine/professional experience like Part 135 so I can increase my skills and be more competitive. I now qualify for some Part 135 FO jobs, but they generally have an 8 and 6 schedule, and I don't want to be apart from my family for a week or more at a time. I've been looking for Part 91 jobs and networking, but no luck yet. Do you know of any way to get experience without having to sacrifice my work-life balance for a year? Any advice on interim steps that will get me a good professional gig? I'm getting nervous. The hiring wave will pass before I get on board. And that's from Kay.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Well, as far as 121 goes, traditional 121, as far as like airlines and regionals and stuff that we all are household names, is going to be very tough without having too many overnights. But God, I would think like in the DCA, BWI area, there's got to be some sort of like shuttle, right? Or like government, like contracted shuttle or something like that.
That was the first thing that came to mind, because if you could find some type of 135 shuttle operation, I'm not as familiar. I did a quick search on Airline Pilot Central and tried to go through and find anything. I couldn't find any operators, but I know there used to be one from like Columbus, I think, or something like that. It used to fly like Avros or something. But either way, I think the corporate shuttle move might be best.
Yeah, you would think that's exactly what I thought. Unfortunately, of course, we don't know everything specifically, but that seems like a good one. I mean, freight, like Ameriflight and stuff, but you're home every night, but it's long days. I don't think you're picking anybody up from school. You leave in the morning and you get home in the evening kind of program, right?
I agree. I wrote down there. I looked. Ameriflight doesn't have a base there, but some type of similar operator like that There are jobs. The problem is you're probably doing like an evening departure, staying somewhere all night, and then coming home in the morning. I don't know if you've got another primary caregiver for the kids to be with them overnight.
Yeah, but that being said, there are jobs out there. Like I remember when I worked at the FBO when I was in college, like one summer off, there was like the state of Arizona Department of Transportation had like turbine command or something. And they would just fly around Arizona for the day and then come back in the afternoon. And there was a gal that did it, and she called it her mom job because she was a mom and that was important to be home, and she did it and it worked out perfect. So there are those jobs out there. I don't think they're the household name jobs that you would recognize or anything like that. And they are harder to find and you got to look, but they're certainly there.
It's similar, even the King Air job that I had when I was flying eye doctors, 0 overnights. Every morning we'd go out, take doctors to a different city. They would do their thing, and then we'd fly them back in the afternoon. There are things there. And I would say the other thing right now, especially in this current hiring climate, is you actually have an advantage for an operation like that because you can lay out and say, look, this is my personal situation. I'm not going to be leaving. I'm not going to be somebody that's going to hire for 6 months and then be gone to the regionals because I can't do it. I need a specific type of job to fit my lifestyle. And that could make you attractive to an employer that sees, having some longevity. The only other thought I had is with the 121 stuff, be aware that if you do go that route at some point, you'll probably have to be gone for probably at least 2 months?
Yeah, for initial, you mean?
For initial.
Like initial training.
So factor that in.
So you get a type rating.
Well, I mean, if you're going to go fly a King Air, maybe a week or two. Yeah. But that's
even so, it's a couple weeks.
Yeah, it is.
I would say. Minimum.
Yep. I think that at the end of the day, a lot is going to be dictated by if you have another primary caregiver available to help you out. My last thought was if you get into specializing in a particular type of aircraft, i.e. a Cirrus or maybe like a TBM, if those opportunities come to you as a flight instructor, maybe you're teaching someone to fly that's like a high net worth individual, and then they're going to be buying an airplane, you could potentially do something like that where you're flying like local business folks around or something like that on their kind of high performance airplane. Might be not the traditional path, but it might work really well, especially if you can kind of generate a little niche. Good question, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so keep us posted how it goes, Kay, and best of luck out there. I think you'll find something. All right. That was Flight Advice, brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt, harveywatt.com, for all your coverage needs.
All right. That does it for Winter Ops. Hopefully we have brought this to the forefront and encourage you to educate yourself, update, get ready. Winter is coming.
Thank you so much for all of the emails, info@215podcast.com. If you want to get in touch or go buy a hat, support the show. Looking forward to hearing from folks. I especially want to hear from somebody that did that diversion to a non-airline station.
Yeah, we want to hear about the most disastrous diversion.
That's right.
I think in an airliner would be interesting, like somewhere where you just ended up where you weren't supposed to be.
Absolutely. All right, well, that'll do it for a couple of weeks. Just remember out there, especially Cole, our listener Cole, flexibility.
It's the key to Eric Power. We'll see you next time.
See ya. The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.